Thomas Garrett had survived 43 winters in the New Mexico high country, but he'd never seen a storm like this. The blizzard had descended without warning, transforming the landscape into a white void where earth and sky became one. His horse had thrown him 2 miles from the ranch house, spooked by lightning that split the afternoon darkness, and now lay motionless in the snow, its leg broken beyond saving. Thomas had done what needed doing with his rifle, then watched his only way home disappear beneath the relentless snowfall. He was going to die out here. The realization came to him not with panic, but with a strange, exhausted clarity. His heavy sheepskin coat, soaked through from the fall, was already freezing stiff against his body. His fingers had gone numb inside his gloves. The ranch house might as well have been 100 miles away instead of 2. In this whiteout, without landmarks or stars to guide him, he could walk in circles until hypothermia claimed him. Thomas did what any sensible man would do. He began gathering deadwood for a fire, his movements sluggish and clumsy. But his matches were wet, his kindling damp, and his hands shook so badly he could barely hold the striker. After the 4th failed attempt, he slumped against a boulder and closed his eyes. Maybe this was how it ended. Maybe after all his years of stubborn independence, of pushing away anyone who tried to get close after Martha died, this frozen wilderness would have the final word. "You'll freeze if you stay there." Thomas's eyes snapped open. Through the swirling snow stood a girl, no more than 16 or 17, wearing only a thin cotton dress and a worn blanket draped across her shoulders. Her feet were wrapped in simple deerskin moccasins. She was Apache, he realized, recognizing the traditional patterns on her blanket. But what was she doing out here, dressed like that, in the middle of a killing storm? You'll freeze," he stammered, his words slurred with cold. "Where's your coat?" The girl moved closer, and Thomas saw her face clearly for the first time. She had eyes that seemed far older than her years, eyes that held something he couldn't quite name, not pity, but understanding. "I will not freeze," she said simply. "But you will, if you try to make fire." Thomas tried to stand, to argue, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. That doesn't make sense. Fire is survival. Fire is life. Fire is death, when you are wet and the storm is strong. The girl knelt beside him, studying him with those ancient eyes. Fire makes you sweat when you are already cold. Fire makes you sleep when you should move. Fire takes all your energy to feed it, and when morning comes, you have nothing left. Then how? Thomas couldn't finish the question. His teeth were chattering too hard. The girl began removing his frozen coat despite his weak protests. "My grandmother taught me, and her grandmother taught her. The old ways. The ways your people forgot when you decided you could master everything with tools and fire and walls." She pulled a knife from her belt and began cutting branches from a nearby juniper. "In winter, the Apache sleep in the snow. We become part of it, not enemies with it." Thomas watched through increasingly heavy eyelids as the girl worked with swift efficiency. She carved a shallow trench in the snow beneath an overhanging rock face, lining it with juniper boughs. She removed his wet outer layers, replacing them with the dry inner layers of his clothing, then wrapped him in her blanket and what remained of his coat. All the while, she explained in a calm, teaching voice. "Your body is a fire that never goes out," she said. "But you must protect it, like protecting coals through the night. Too much air, the coals go cold. Too much fuel, they burn too fast and die. You must be still. You must be small. You must let the snow become your shelter, not your enemy." She lay down beside him in the trench, showing him how to position his body to conserve heat, how to breathe slowly to avoid losing warmth through rapid exhalation, how to keep his hands tucked close to his core. As she pulled snow over them like a blanket, creating a small cave, Thomas felt his panic rising. "We'll suffocate," he gasped. "No. The snow breathes. And so will we." Her voice was patient, like a mother teaching a frightened child. "My name is Nalin. It means, maiden. What is yours? Thomas. His lips could barely form the word. Thomas, you must trust what you do not understand. Your people, you think survival means fighting. Building bigger fires, thicker walls, heavier coats. But sometimes survival means becoming soft. Becoming small. Letting the earth hold you. As the snow settled over them and the storm raged above, Thomas felt something he hadn't expected, warmth. Not the aggressive heat of fire, but a gentle, steady warmth that seemed to grow from within. The girl's breathing beside him was slow and rhythmic, and he found himself matching it, his body relaxing despite everything his mind told him should be happening. Why are you out here? He whispered into the darkness of their snow cave. Why did you help me? There was a long silence, filled only with the muffled howl of wind above. When Nalin finally spoke, her voice carried a weight that made Thomas's chest ache. 3 days ago, a rancher found my father fixing fence line on land he said was his, though it has been our hunting ground for generations. He shot him without warning, without words. My father was unarmed. He was 60 years old. She paused, and Thomas heard her swallow. I was tracking that rancher through the storm. I don't know what I was going to do. I had my father's knife. I had anger that burned hotter than any fire. Thomas's blood ran cold, and not from the temperature. I'm a rancher. I know. So why not leave me? Why save me? Another long silence. When Nalin spoke again, her voice was thick with tears, but steady. Because my grandmother taught me more than survival. She taught me that we do not become our pain. She taught me that when we see someone suffering, we do not ask if they deserve our help. We ask only if we can give it. The girl's voice cracked. She taught me that the moment we stop being human to each other is the moment we lose everything that matters. Thomas felt hot tears running down his frozen cheeks. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry for what happened to your father. For all of it. They lay in silence as the storm continued its assault on the world above. Thomas thought about his life, his prejudices, his assumptions. He thought about the Apache families he'd seen and never truly looked at, people he'd dismissed as relics of a past that should stay buried. He thought about all the times he'd chosen anger and suspicion over understanding. When Thomas woke, pale dawn light was filtering through the snow above their shelter. The storm had passed. Beside him, Nalin was already awake, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. You should go home now, she said quietly. Follow the sun. It will guide you. Thomas sat up slowly, his body stiff but alive, impossibly, miraculously alive. Come with me, he said. Please. Let me give you food, warm clothes, a horse to wherever you need to go. Nalin shook her head. Your people will not understand why an Apache girl is in your home. Then let them not understand. Let me start trying to make this right. Thomas reached out, his hand trembling, and gently took hers. You saved my life when you had every reason to let me die. You taught me something I should have learned 50 years ago, that the ways I don't understand aren't wrong, they're just different. That the people I've dismissed as primitive might know things I desperately need to know. The girl's eyes filled with tears. One act of kindness cannot undo what has been done. No, Thomas agreed, his voice rough. But maybe it can be a beginning. My name carries weight in this territory. I can't bring your father back, but I can use that weight differently than I have been. I can speak for people who've had no voice. I can learn, and teach others to learn. He squeezed her hand. But first, I need to learn. Will you teach me? Not just survival, though God knows I need that too, but everything. Your language, your stories, your ways of seeing the world I've been too blind and stubborn to see. Nalin studied his face for a long moment, searching for something. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her, because slowly, carefully, she nodded. The walk back to the ranch house took 3 hours. Thomas moved stiffly, his body remembering its ordeal, but his mind was clearer than it had been in years. Nalin walked beside him, pointing out signs in the landscape he'd never learned to read, the direction of water, the presence of shelter, the paths animals took through the territory. Each observation was a small gift, a piece of knowledge freely given. When they crested the final hill and the ranch house came into view, Thomas saw his ranch hands running toward them, their faces shocked and relieved. Jake Morrison, his foreman for 15 years, reached them first. "Boss! Thank God. We thought you were dead. We were about to send out a search." Jake stopped, his eyes moving to Nalin with obvious suspicion. "Who's this?" Thomas straightened his shoulders, feeling the weight of the moment. "This is Nalin. She saved my life last night. She's going to be staying with us as our guest, and she's going to teach us some things we should have learned a long time ago." Jake's expression hardened. "Boss, I don't think. I don't care what you think, Jake." Thomas's voice was firm but not unkind. "I nearly died last night because I was too stubborn to see past my own assumptions. This girl, with nothing but a blanket and knowledge I dismissed as primitive, kept me alive through a blizzard that should have killed us both. So yes, she's staying. And yes, we're learning from her. And if that's a problem for you or anyone else, well, there are other ranches." The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Thomas watched his men exchange glances, saw the calculations behind their eyes. Finally, Jake nodded slowly. "All right, boss. All right." Over the following weeks, something remarkable happened at the Garrett Ranch. Nalin began teaching not just Thomas, but any of the ranch hands who were willing to listen. She showed them how to read weather in the behavior of animals and the quality of light. She taught them which plants could heal wounds and which could poison cattle. She demonstrated techniques for tracking, for reading sign, for understanding the land as a living thing rather than just property to be used. Thomas, meanwhile, began using his influence in ways he never had before. He spoke at town meetings about the Apache families who'd been driven from their traditional lands. He hired Apache workers at fair wages, over the objections of other ranchers. He rode to the territorial capital and testified about the murder of Nalin's father, identifying the killer and demanding justice. It wasn't easy. He lost friends, lost business partners, lost his standing in the Ranchers Association. But he gained something more valuable, he gained purpose. He gained understanding. He gained a connection to the land and its people that transcended ownership and power. One evening, 6 months after that terrible blizzard, Thomas and Nalin sat on the ranch house porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. She was preparing to leave, to return to what remained of her family's band in the high country. She had taught him everything she could, and now it was time for both of them to move forward. "I still don't understand why you really saved me that night," Thomas said quietly. "Kindness and humanity sound good, but your father had just been murdered. You had every right to want revenge." Nalin was quiet for a long moment, watching the last light fade from the sky. "My grandmother used to say that hate is the easiest thing in the world to feed. It eats anything you give it, your joy, your peace, your future. It grows and grows until there's nothing left of you but the hate itself." She turned to look at him, and in her eyes Thomas saw not the girl he'd met in the blizzard, but the wise woman she would become. "When I found you dying in the snow, I had a choice. I could let hate eat one more piece of the world, or I could choose something else. Something harder." "What made you choose the harder thing?" "Because my father would have." Tears slid down her cheeks, catching the last light. "He was a kind man. A gentle man. He taught me to see the humanity in everyone, even those who couldn't see it in us. If I let you die, if I became the hate that killed him, then everything he taught me would die too. And I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't let hate win." Thomas reached over and took her hand, this young woman who had taught him how to survive in more ways than one. "Your father would be so proud of you." "I hope so," she whispered. "I hope so." The next morning, Thomas gave Nalin supplies, a strong horse, and enough money to help her family through the winter. He hugged her goodbye, this unlikely teacher who had appeared in a blizzard and changed everything. "Will you be all right?" she asked him, concern in her voice. Thomas smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes for the first time in longer than he could remember. "I learned from the best. I'll survive. Not just the cold, but all of it. Because of you." As he watched her ride toward the mountains, Thomas thought about survival, real survival, not just not dying, but living with purpose and connection and hope. He thought about the night in the snow, how certain he'd been that he knew how the world worked, how survival worked, how people worked. He'd been wrong about all of it. And that wrongness had nearly killed him. But a girl with nothing but knowledge and compassion had saved him. She'd saved him from the cold, yes, but also from himself, from his prejudices, from a lifetime of building walls instead of bridges. Thomas turned back to his ranch house, where his hands were waiting for the day's work to begin, and made himself a promise. He would spend the rest of his life trying to be worthy of that gift. He would learn, and listen, and teach others to do the same. He would speak for those without voices. He would bridge divides instead of deepening them. He would survive, yes. But more than that, he would live, really live, with the wisdom he'd learned sleeping in the snow beside a girl who chose humanity over hate. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to start healing a world that had been cold for far too long.